Here's the full recording of a webinar, Anatomy of an Email, that we delivered in February 2014. It's just about 45 minutes long. The audience for this session was mixed. We can customize our sessions for teams, departments, or entire companies.
So terrific, I just started recording. We'll kick off now. We will inevitably have some folks joining us, and I may have to do a little bit of technical troubleshooting along the way, but I'll be expeditious about it if we get through that. Putting people on mute here. Terrific. We're talking today about email and how much email we get. I really liked this title because we're talking really about, the body of an email, but all of its appendages, all of the parts of an email. So we're going to spend about 40 minutes today dissecting an email, looking at all of the components of the message that you're sending so that we can make sure that it resonates with the reader, okay? So I'm going to start off with just a quick introduction of Write It Well and who I am and who we are before I jump right into our content. Some of you are familiar names to me. We've either done business before, we've had conversations before. Write It Well has actually been around in business for 35 years as a woman-owned business based in California. We've been helping people improve business writing skills for all that time, and we develop a series of business writing books. We have facilitator kits for trainers. We have webinars, we have e-learning, we have on-site training. So we're helping people address various learning topics, okay, from email to reports, proposals, presentation skills, writing performance evaluations. So we're always in that space around written communications. The furthest afield we've gone really is around virtual meetings and, like I said, presentation skills. So we also have business in Asia, and that's been a terrific opportunity to really map out our global footprint, if you will, and to look at how important it is when you're communicating across time zones and cultures to really understand audience. So there's some tricky issues, of course, in global business, even in your department or in your unit, maybe a product you're supporting that has a global reach. Let's see, today we're going to talk about this thing again called email and all of these various emails that come in. Before we jump into our content, though, I just want to spend a couple minutes talking about WebEx and how we're going to use this virtual training space today. You've called in or you're using the integrated voice over IP through WebEx. Some of you are probably pretty comfortable in WebEx or other platforms, and for some of you this is maybe a sort of new experience, but I've put many of you on, or most of you, on mute, just so that we can minimize background noise. But and we do have a fairly large group today, so if you want to add something, you can always use the chat feature. I'm going to make sure everyone is comfortable using that in a minute, but there will be time to take yourself off mute and have a conversation as well. Okay, so we're going to use the chat panel most of all today. I find that's the best tool for a large group like this one. So we'll use the chat panel. So I'm just grabbing my cursor here, being kind of funny. We're going to use the chat panel. We're going to raise our hand just like we do in a real live classroom, say yes and no. And I have a couple polls that I've inserted here today. They're not really quizzes, but they're a great way to get the pulse on opinions really quickly. So I think polling is a terrific feature in WebEx. Just so we're all clear, we're going to use the chat panel. Let's put our fingers in the chat panel and just make sure everyone's working it well. Michelle, I think you just turned your video feature on, which is great. You may want to minimize that. We're just going to be on audio and looking at slides today. And a couple other people playing around with video, which is A-okay, but we're going to stick to the slides and voice plus chat is going to be our tools for those are going to be our tools for the day. So let's put our fingers into the chat panel and just write your name and the organization that you represent today, okay? Your name and the organization you represent. See somebody with okay, folks chatting in. Lisa, welcome. Nancy with the state of Minnesota. Jan at Tastefully Simple, welcome. Emily with Ag Future, nice to see you. Ron from Crestline Hotels and Resorts. And Jim also with Crestline, terrific. Girl Scouts of Colorado, wonderful, thanks Marlene. And Bernita Burge, City of San Francisco. Marianne from Equity Risk, and Lynn, also Equity Risk in San Francisco, welcome. Okay, Unum, it's S. Manning. I'm sorry, I don't know your first name, but welcome from Portland, Maine.
Hi,
Stacey.
good morning. My name is Michelle Chuang.
Hi, Michelle. Hi, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
We're just using the chat feature. Okay, great. We're just using the chat feature now. So if you want to go ahead and chat the name of your organization, that would be great. All right, so I think we're comfortable using chat. I am a one-person show today, so I do monitor chat pretty efficiently. I have some different bells and whistles that go off on my end. But if you have a question or want me to slow down or speed up, you can send me personally a chat, or you can chat to all participants when we're sharing ideas. So, chat feature is terrific. If it takes me a minute to see your note, bear with me. I will come back to it. Okay, so Alice Allen from West Coast Producers. Welcome also. We can use another feature in WebEx, yes and no, just like we do in a classroom. So we'll be able to give our opinion quickly by saying yes, which is the green check, and no, which is the red X. Let's just try it quickly. Yes or no, have you participated in a WebEx webinar before? Okay, have you participated in a WebEx webinar before? A yes or no. Nancy is saying, yes, I have. Many of you have. I think WebEx is really one of the best tools out there. Emily's maybe had a webinar experience, but not in WebEx. Alice is saying not in WebEx, but probably a webinar experience as well. So terrific, powerful tool. We here at Write It Well think that, if done right, and if they're still interactive and engaging and involve the participants heavily, that you can gain almost as much in a webinar as you can in on-site training, although we can have another conversation with that individually, one-on-one, if you'd like some other time. Let's jump into our agenda today. Oh, right, and I am going to talk a little bit about polling or show you a couple polls later, but we don't need to practice right now. I think we can jump right into our agenda. And say, agenda here, we're going to talk today about the to and the CC lines. Okay, what happens? Remember, we're looking at the whole body of an email, the anatomy. We're dissecting the email. The subject line, that's a really important piece of our email, and how can we use it to get our readers' attention? The opening, wow, that's where we make our first connection with our reader, and how do we do that? Salutation, that's where we say dear or hi, and then we close. We always have a closing, and what kind of closing should that be? We have the email body to pay attention to, and we have a conclusion in almost every email. Probably not everyone, but most of our emails have a conclusion as well. Okay, so that's our agenda. In the newsletter or invitation that you responded to, you probably saw a little bit more information about each of those parts of an email, but we have more information to offer on each one of them. Any questions on our agenda before I jump in? Just go ahead and, I just cleared the feedback, raise your hand if you have any questions about the agenda, thought your flight was going to a different destination. Okay, I'm going to take that as a okay to move forward then, and say, email is taking over, right? We spend 28% of each workday reading, writing, and responding to email. The McKinsey Global Institute says that it's about 650 hours per year. As of 2012, there was no longer any way to calculate how many emails have been sent, but we know that it's in the quadrillions. Okay, so 300 billion emails are sent and received daily. And Kai Ryssdal, the New York Times, say that the average corporate employee sends and receives about 100 emails a day. Raise your hand if you get more than 50 emails a day. I don't know if you can hear that kind of croaking noise on my side, but those are hands going up. So, wow, keep your hand up if you actually, let's just jump straight to 100. Put your hand down if it's less than 100, but how many of you are receiving more than 100 emails a day? Wow, a lot of people. So what does that mean for all of us? You know, it's a huge volume, and they say it's growing every day. It means essentially that you've got 15 seconds to get your point across, because you have a lot of email, but the people that you're emailing, which could in theory be each other in this room, are receiving a ton of email. So it's really important to present a professional image, to focus quickly and carefully on your business objectives, and to get to the point right away. So let's start with how do you do that with the to and the CC lines. Okay, how about a quick chat here? What's the difference? You know, for some of this is a reminder, but really, what's the difference between to and CC? Who goes on the to line and who goes on the CC line? Let's just have a chat conversation. Okay, so Nancy's saying CC is more of an FYI. I absolutely agree. I would say it even more strongly. CC is just for your information, okay? So, and to is for the email, is the person that email is directed to, and CC is the FYI, right? So all of this means, we're all saying the same thing, thankfully, which means that the person that you're actually writing to, that either needs the information or needs to do something, needs to be in the to line, and the CC line is for people who may, but may not read your email. Okay, so in theory, those people who are on the CC line can take the email and they can file it in some sort of file and they can read it at their convenience. Okay, if they need the information to do their job, to complete the project, or to show up in the meeting informed, they need to be on the to line. Okay, so it's interesting in Asia, just as an aside, when you're listing people in a to line, it's very important to list them in hierarchical order. Okay, so why do I mention that? Because there are different cultural nuances that you may need to be aware of, either in your organization or in the organization you're communicating with, or with the person individually that you're working with. Okay, so think about that also as you think through email, of course, that there's lots of other cultural nuances. Rebecca asks, is it recommended that an email only be addressed to one person if you're asking a question, if you're not dealing with a group? Yeah, I mean, I think that's why we're having the conversation really about the to and the CC. If you need information for one person, that person goes on the to line. If the information needs to be shared with all the others, you can tell them in the to, you can tell them in that first message rather, please respond to everyone in CC so we all have the information at the same time. I'm always really impressed by people who tell others how to respond. You know, either please don't reply all, or let's use reply all to communicate, or please respond including all the people copied on this message. Okay, that's transparent and effective communication. Okay, so hopefully I answered your question. We can come back to it, Rebecca, if there's others. Right, so the people that go in the to line are the people who are responsible for writing back to you. Okay, so it's another kind of filter that you want to apply. Here's an example. Let's say you're writing from Angela to Ben, Cho, and Vic, and it's priority. Okay, it's urgent that I get Lisa Starbeck's email address. Thanks if somebody could send it to me, and Vic is replying, here's the address. Now here's just a simple example. But when Vic writes back, he moves Ben and Chu to the CC line. Okay, so simple but effective, move people around if they don't need the information. They don't need to act on it, okay? You're moving them around consciously, Okay, so subject line, we're going to come back to 2 and CC, but I want to jump over to subject line so we can address that issue. Most readers are drowning in email, okay, and never actually read past the subject line. Sad but true. Okay, so let's talk about tools and techniques to get your reader to actually open your email to go further. Raise your hand if you achieve what's today called Inbox Zero lifestyle. In other words, all of your emails can be acted on, responded to, you're responding to all. I don't see any hands. Oh, I see, here's somebody. Marlene, can you tell us about that? I just took you off mute. Love to hear your strategies.
I make my subject line very much to the point.
Okay. So you think the ticket here is making sure that your subject line, probably the rest of your email is effective too if you're able to get responses. You know, I think lots of us come to email conversations like this one looking for the magic bullet. You know, I send out all these emails, I don't get responses to all of them. What can I say or do differently? What's the one thing I can do? And, you know, there's usually not one thing. There's a handful of strategies that you want to put into practice to increase your response rate, and one of them is by using, you know, even more effective subject lines. So we have some guidelines for effective subject lines. Sounds like Marlene is already putting a lot of these into play, but here are the ones that we suggest, okay? So make the subject line specific, make it descriptive, make it concise and clear, and how many of you do this already? Change it when the subject changes. Okay, every once in a while you have an organization that has, you know, a naming formula, okay, that they have to use. But for the most part, we see it as a crafting exercise. Yeah, Marlene, a comment.
Oh,
I'm sorry. Did you have your hand up?
no.
Oh, okay. So that was from earlier. Sorry. Sometimes I lose the thread here. I lose the hand up. But yeah, interrupt me anytime. So these are the guidelines that we want to be focusing on. Again, specific, descriptive, concise and clear, and changing the subject when the subject line when the subject changes. Okay. So let's look at some samples. You know, the ones that really drive me crazy are the ones like this. How many of you think these are effective? Okay. Give us a green check if you think that these are effective sample subject lines. Yeah, Marlene's saying no. Rebecca's saying no, they're not. Shelley's saying no, these are not. You know, I still see emails that, you know, subject lines with hello or meeting or, you know, project. You know, they're not helping us move our business needs forward. So what would we do with these? We would start improving them, right? It's a crafting exercise. Funds might be funds transfer, okay? Benefits might become benefits for health spending. Your question, which is not helpful, might become printer specs. Q3 estimate, again, estimate for Q3 here, program expansion. What do you think? Are we headed in the right direction? Can they be improved more? I think so. So now we go from funds transfer. Now we are really specific here. Signed form needed to process RMB funds transfer. Okay? So I think the takeaway here, the important takeaway, is that when you craft a subject line, it's not the thing that you dash off quickly. It's something that requires some creativity and some thought. Right? We also like to say, you know, include a call to action if that's relevant. Benefits for health spending becomes expanded options for HMO participants. Printer specs, what do you know? It actually could be a lot more specific. HP and brother comparison here, and so on. Okay, so again, following some basic guidelines for making them more effective. I just want to remind you all that your reader may be reading your subject line, your entire email, on their phone, okay? So we wanted to mention at this point some of the challenges of reading email on a phone, but also some of the benefits that we've learned from social media, including Twitter. there's a lot of lessons learned from for email subject lines from those of us that tweet. Okay, so a couple, tweeting is a great practice for writing sharply focused email subject lines, right? Because while Twitter forces you to keep your message to 140 characters, there's no hard rule with subject lines, but we know that we need to keep them concise to keep our readers' attention. Another lesson learned from Twitter around active language. We'll talk about this a little bit when we talk about the body, the text in your email. Readers want you to get to your main point right away, okay? Same with Twitter, same with email. Careful grammar, punctuation, and tone can set your business writing apart on any platform. Okay, so same with email, again, same with Twitter and other social media platforms. Customers and clients have limited attention to spare. Keeping your language active, focused, and concise persuades them that your messages are worth their time. Okay, so I think we all agree that subject lines are the first impression that you make. It may be the only message they read, and then we want to think about how we write for Twitter or other platforms, again, to make sure that we're being as concise and on message as possible. Let's put it into practice for 1 minute here. We just made up a scenario. Let's try writing an effective subject line based on this scenario. And actually, instead of using chat, I'm going to use a poll. Feel free to chat. Oh, okay. And Rebecca says earlier, next week is dangerous. I think that's a really good point. If you say next week, you want to, control yourself if you're saying something as vague and unhelpful as next week. Wednesday at 3 o'clock is a lot better than next week. I'm not sure exactly which, I think that was from an email subject line example. So thanks for catching that, Rebecca. Always room for improvements. Let's write an effective subject line here. And like I said, just to make it a little easier, I am opening a poll, and we can vote. You'll see a poll pop up. Let's vote on which one you think is most effective. Okay, we have a few people who haven't jumped into our poll yet, so go ahead and jump in. And we have 1 person in progress, 2 haven't started, last chance. Okay, so WebEx just takes a minute to share with us. And now, hopefully you can all see, most of us voted for the huge majority here. We're voting for C, right? So review regulatory changes by Friday, please. Okay, so gone are the subject lines that are vague and ambiguous and not helpful and don't catch your reader's attention, like the first one, and pretty much the second one too. Okay, so include the call to action as well in your subject line. You're going to get people's attention that way. Right, and Jan's also saying use the actual date versus Friday, so there's no mixed messages, right? Absolutely. Jan, really good point. Use, Friday, March 3rd. I've lost track of the calendar actually, but right, whatever Friday is, that's the date you want to actually use. So really good point there. Okay, so here we're back to the message from Angela to Ben and Cho and Vic, and saying that it's a priority. And hi and welcome if you just joined us. I'm going to go ahead and put folks on mute just to make sure we don't have too much background interference, but I'm glad you were able to join us today. Okay, so it's urgent that I get Lisa Sarbeck's email address. Thanks if one of you could send it. Vic sends it like this. What kind of subject line does Angela come up with? Maybe the first one is please send Lisa Sarbeck's email address. Okay, and then what kind of return message? How about Lisa Sarbeck's email address? Okay, simple but effective. What you're telling somebody by changing the email subject line is that you're paying attention, you're right there with them, you are an excellent, clear communicator. Okay, so there's a lot of power in changing that. Here's another example. Let's say you're just sending an informative message. Please be aware that the final phase of the project must be completed by X date. What kind of subject line? Remember May 24th project deadline. Okay, so just playing around here with some samples. Main point here is that you, again, want to spend a little bit of time on subject lines before we move into our opening. Really, I mean, if you look at your subject line as the first chance, the opening is your second chance. So there's a couple things that you want to be aware of as you write your opening statement here. One, it's a great way to make a personal connection with your reader, but you want to get straight to the point in an email. Remember, email and business writing are the polar opposite of academic writing. So when we work with new entrants to the workforce, that's our first message. You may have just finished graduate school or even undergraduate where you learned how to write a 13-page essay and include your conclusion at the end, but forget everything you learned in school. In business, the main point is always at the beginning of your message, okay, in the opening. Okay, so the opening is like your elevator pitch. It's the chance to justify your claims on the reader's time within what we know is a limited window. Okay, so keep in mind this is your chance to get their attention. Raise your hand if you regularly and consciously try to use your first email line to deliver your most important message. Fantastic. Fantastic. So you're really trying to do two things with your opening. You're trying to get your main point across in case people only read the first two lines, all right? And the other thing is to establish very quickly that personal connection. Okay, so this is the decision tree that we use at Write It Well and have been using for 30 years. It's called influencing and informing. And the same ideas, these time-tested ideas, still work today. In fact, they work even better today. So when you're writing an email or anything, you want to determine your purpose. Your purpose is either to influence someone, and that's not pushy or aggressive or rude, but it's clear you're trying to get somebody to do something, or you're simply informing them. Okay, so next thing you write, determine whether you're writing to influence or writing to inform. Why? Because the more clarity you have on your purpose, the more likely you are to achieve your outcome. Okay, so lots of people come back and say, well, I'm really trying to do both. I'm informing, I'm influencing by informing. Well, that's true, maybe, but the most important thing is to focus on doing one thing very well. Okay, it doesn't mean you need to be rude or curt or impolite and unprofessional in any way. It means you need to be clear on your purpose for writing. Okay, always have it. So let's just use chat here. What do you think you do most? What do you think you do most? Writing to inform or writing to influence? I'm going to tell you, usually I write to influence. What about you all? Rebecca's saying inform, Marlene's saying inform, lots of informs here, which is fine, but what that means, right? Inform, 60-40, influence, influence. If you're writing to inform, you're probably acknowledged already that what you're expecting is either no response at all or just some sort of comprehension of your message, right? So imagine me taking a piece of paper and giving it to you and you taking it and putting it down. That's informing. If you expect somebody to do something, prepare, give you comments, send you thoughts for the agenda, call Sally Ann tomorrow, whatever it is, that's influencing. And again, why is that important? Because it's important because people spend very little time at the beginning reading your message. You want to get their attention quickly at the beginning. Okay, and welcome if you just joined us. Glad to have you on the call. We can circle back to some introductions later, but we're in the middle of the body of the email, okay? We're somewhere around the torso right now, and we are going through subject lines as well as openings here. Remember, Angela is still writing to Ben and Cho and Vic, and the subject had been, please send Lisa Sarbeck's email. And then here's Lisa Sarbeck's email address, okay? Again, opening, let's just look at a few examples. Tone is really important with your opening, okay? Tone is really important, and your tone can be abrupt or polite. It can be cordial, casual, professional, stuffy, straightforward. It can probably be other things as well, but you want to make sure that your tone is appropriate, okay? So using please and thank you is a terrific way to set tone. Another way to set tone is by making some sort of personal connection at the beginning of your email. I often start with simply, if I have nothing else, kind of, you know, they say if you have nothing nice to say, say nothing, right? So I start with something nice, which might even be as, you know, pedantic as thanks for your note or thanks for your interest. I mean it genuinely. Or great to see you last week, or thanks for attending our webinar, some sort of personal connection, and then jumping pretty quickly into your message. We also believe here at Write It Well that your salutation is a very important piece of the tone that you set, okay? So how many of you, quick raise of hands, if you use a salutation in most of your email? I'm just going to go quickly back to a question Rebecca's asking in chat. So what if you're telling somebody about an upcoming event they are assigned to? Okay, well, hopefully they're going to be, you know, the news isn't all bad, right? So, you know, great news, we had a terrific meeting last week. Turns out that you're assigned to the event on Thursday evening, and more details about the assignment follow. And maybe you've bullet pointed the tasks that come next. So it can still be friendly and upbeat and professional, even if we're taking on new projects. I mean, it depends who you're writing to. Hopefully that's a positive as well. But Rebecca, if that doesn't address your question, I want to come back to it. Many of you are raising your hand and saying, yeah, I use salutations. You know, for the most part, I do use a salutation. What kind of salutations do you use? Let's chat in some of the salutations that you use. Salutation is like the dear, right? Hi, hello. Hello, hi, greetings, good afternoon, terrific. So good morning, good afternoon. Hi or dear. Okay, so sometimes it's tricky because you're writing to a group, and we wrote an email, happy Monday, good morning, hey there, you know, that's friendly, definitely upbeat. You're setting your tone, right, with your salutation. We like to tell people when they're writing to a group to remember the power of personalization. So sometimes people don't feel bought into your email because you're writing to a large group and you haven't connected with them on any personal level. So if it's just awkward or it's impossible because there's too many people in the group and you can't separate it into smaller groups, try identifying them by some sort of designation that brings them together. So here's some examples, you know, maybe dear clients. I don't think that's the best example. You can probably do better. You know, to my clients, hi everyone, hi associates, or maybe it's, you know, team rockstar. Maybe you have a certain team that's working on a particular project. Call them out by name so that you're making a personal connection with them. So get as close to that person, I mean appropriately, as you can. You're making that kind of connection. All right, so salutations are important. It also, even though this sounds, you know, silly, it does help the reader know that the message is directed to them. Okay, so, you know, we all know that emails go to the wrong place at some time, and, you know, just giving that person the confidence that you're really communicating in a personal way. That's pretty powerful. The point here on closings is important as well. If we're talking about openings, just a note here on closings. Use a closing to wrap up your email, okay? So always use a closing and make sure that your closing matches your opening. Okay, so if you used a very formal opening, use a very formal closing. I've seen people at times use things that are a little bit inappropriate in terms of closings. Make sure that yours is matching, that it's appropriate for the business setting as well. presenting a professional image. Okay, so let's just talk a little bit about the email body. What happens in the email body? We want to talk about a few techniques and tools. We have a lot of content on the email body, but we've just teased out some important points here. What happens? So what you want to use are lots of verbs, action verbs, okay, in the active voice. Okay, we have lots more information about active and passive voice. You can even do a Google search if that is ringing a bell, but you can't pinpoint the importance of it. Active voice will bring your writing to life, whereas passive voice will slow your writing down and potentially confuse readers. Okay, so active verbs, that's one strategy. Another, lists. We love lists. Okay, we devoted half of one of our books, Professional Writing Skills, to the guidelines for using lists effectively. Bottom line is that research shows that anything is better than long, dense paragraphs. Okay, lists are totally appropriate, and so are headings. I'll show you some examples. But also language, okay? So take a quick look at this one. Which passage do you prefer? Which passage do you prefer here? I just had just a preference poll here. Which passage do you prefer? It's about language. And I called it B instead of 2. Apologies, I think you know which one I mean there though, right? So we've got a few people still voting. Yeah, so far it's unanimous. We all agree it's B. The first one is, at the February meeting, we'll hold a discussion of the new health plan, whether to revise the procedure manual, and a draft will be developed of the early retirement policy. Okay, it's a little clunky language. Put your verbs to work, okay? And this also leads nicely into the conversation about lists. But first, focus on verbs. Okay, I'm going to close this poll because we have some folks who didn't get a chance to vote, but go ahead, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, okay. And I'm just going to share those results, and you can see that those of us who voted definitely think B. If you're sending any one of us an email, use this language style, okay? At the February meeting, we will discuss the new health plan, decide whether to revise the procedures manual, and draft an early retirement policy, okay? Again, you've put those verbs to work, and what else does that tell you? This tells you you have parallel construction now. You didn't in the first, but now you have parallel construction. Go ahead and use a list, okay? We'll do 3 things at the February meeting. We'll hold a discussion, we'll decide whether to revise, and we'll develop a draft of the early retirement policy, okay? Lists are fantastic. There are some other guidelines that you want to follow when you write lists. Happy to share more information with you offline. But another really powerful tool for emails, we usually think of headings as something we'd use in a longer report, maybe even a proposal, but how many of you would prefer, just quick raise of hands, how many of you would prefer to read the email that includes headings here? It's just a quick visual snapshot. Oops, I forgot to clear the feedback earlier, so we're feedback on top of feedback, but I think that the support is overwhelming for headings in an email, right? So using headings or using lists, anything but long, dense paragraphs. Again, this is not just my opinion. Research shows that is the most difficult way to communicate with your reader, okay? Long, dense paragraphs. Okay, so part of your email, the next piece of it, let's say that it's the feet, we're going to talk about the conclusion. Okay, so how about a quick chat here? What do you do? What's the point of writing a conclusion? What should happen in the conclusion of your email? What should happen? Okay, great. Jim's saying maybe that's where you put the call to action. Great. Those are your action points. Terrific, Nancy. A summary. Yep, I like that. Summary and next steps. It recaps the message. tells you what time you need to respond by. You return to your purpose. Excellent. Restate what you want the reader to do. Because think about how you're reading an email, right? You're skimming and scanning. You're looking at the subject line, and then you're most likely looking at the opening. You're probably, unless it's bullet points or headings, you're skipping most of the body of the email, and you're going down to the conclusion, okay? So the conclusion in your email is very important because you know that's probably where you go first, all right? We're like cheating at the end of the novel, okay? But you're going to the end and you're finding out what's important here, so make sure you've really packed a punch in the conclusions that you write, okay? It's your opportunity to restate your message. Effective emails, let's go back to the anatomy. It's the body, making sure you don't have any, stains on your lapel, that your pants still fit the way you want them to. This is proofreading, folks, okay? So here are some tips on proofreading. First, take breaks when you're writing a first draft, revising it, and proofreading it. We all know that any email could end up anywhere. So if this email has, any importance attached to it, give yourself a chance to come back to it. Put it down, come back. I guarantee you, in the second try, you'll find some errors or even ways to improve it. Try reading it out loud. If it sounds awkward to you, it will probably sound awkward to others. If you're really desperate, you really need to make sure this thing is perfect, try proofreading backwards. So start at the bottom of the email and work your way up. Remember to check in other, less looked at places, like the subject line, like headings. Make sure there's no errors lurking there, because oftentimes we can miss them. Anyone notice this one here? We did a little check there. Proofreading? No. Proofreading, right? So make sure that, none of those errors are sneaking into your emails either. Attachments, right? I guess this is like the handbag or the briefcase that you're attaching to your body. Attachments, we send so many attachments to each other. And we just wanted to include a point here that when you're sending attachments to folks, decide before you attach it if the readers actually need the attachment, okay? And if they do, tell your readers that you've attached a file, and then take it even further. Save them time by telling them what the attachment is and explain what you expect them to do with it, okay? So you got to make the assumption that people might not actually open your attachment, okay? So that's just got to be your working attachment. And also, there's so many big files out there. Think of other ways to share email, different files. Take some of the pressure off email too. Use your calendaring function to take some of the pressure off. Use survey tools to gather feedback for various things. Use Google Drive to, get feedback. There's so many tools at our disposal, so think about ways to take some of the pressure, again, off of email, okay? Just as a conclusion here, remember that you can fine-tune the mechanics of your email. Always you can fine-tune. Keep your communication running smoothly in order to get where you need to go. We covered a lot. I'm looking at time and wanted to make sure I stuck to mine. We talked already about the to and the CC lines, right? The subject line and how to craft them carefully, how important an opening is. If you do need to run, I think some people probably do have end stops here, but we're just going to wrap up and have some conversation. So stick with us if you can, but if you need to move on, I do understand. The salutation and closing, right, you want to include them both. Focusing on the email body and making it readable, and the conclusion, right? That's where you wrap up. And here's our conclusion, okay? Our conclusion, we have lots of different ways to help writers improve email and other forms of business communication. Please let us know if you want to hear more about the Write It Well offerings, books, iPDFs, e-learning, webinars, on-site training, facilitator kits, and more on many other writing skills topics. So I'm going to open the phone lines if any of you want to stick around and have a quick conversation. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for the terrific feedback. I'm getting lots of really nice chat messages. Thank you. I will record the session. Let me know if one of your colleagues would like to view it. It will be restricted viewing, but I can make arrangements for you. Thanks so much for your participation. And let's go back to chat if there's anyone who has a question or a thought to share. If you have any questions, Jan Keller says it's beautiful in Alexandria, Minnesota. Cold, I bet, but beautiful. How nice. Anyone, if you go ahead and take yourself off mute, if you have any questions, you can also chat them in. I'm monitoring chat now. Thanks for your nice comments. Any last call for thoughts, comments, questions? I see most people need to be moving on with the other tasks at hand. So I will start shutting down the room, but feel free to get in touch with me with any questions. How do I get a copy of the presentation is the question. You know, happy to share. We do have I think the best way to get more information about email, look on our website. We do have some free resources on our website. We also have a brand new book. We wrote a book in 2007 called Email, A Write It Well Guide. It continues to be the #1 ranked email book on Amazon. We just put out a new version of the book. It's available as an iPDF, so you can download it instantly from our website, which is writeitwell.com. It's also available on Amazon as a Kindle book. You know, these resources don't cost a lot. We're talking about, you know, $10, $20. So terrific way, lots of exercises and activities that are totally job relevant. So I would say look on the Write It Well site or on Amazon for our other resources. Happy to share free ones with you that are already posted on our site. You can contact me. I'm just typing in my email address. Okay. Terrific. The final call for questions? Okay. Thank you again for your terrific participation, and I wish you all a fantastic day ahead. Thanks.